Hello, and welcome to North Coast Journal Preview. This is a show where we take a look at the current edition of the North Coast Journal. My name is Matt Knight, and I am thrust into the position of being your host today.
Desperate times, Matt.
Joining me is North Coast Journal's news editor, Thad Greenson, and the arts and features editor, Jennifer Fumiko Cahill. Welcome, guys.
How you doing?
How you doing?
Good. You don't look any worse for wear for the last 24 hours.
That's because you can't see the rest of my house. Although it's mostly cleaned up now. As I was saying before we started, we lost a lot of plates and dishes. All my cabinets opened up. And so, and there was so much glass. It was Christmas at Nakatomi Plaza here in my house. It was something else. But we're lucky because we don't have to boil our water. The house is safe and everybody is safe, so I'll take it. Yeah. But it was a lot.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but it is stuff, you know.
Just stuff.
Yeah. So.
None of my ugly stuff.
Of course not.
None of the stuff that like regifted to you or like, you know, like the mug you got at the bank 10 years ago, solid as a rock, never going to break.
Bounces and lands.
Just bounces and lands.
Well, let's crack on and talk about what is on the cover of the North Coast Journal this week, and then we'll move on to more current events.
Yeah. So this week we have Project Censored and Random Length News always pair up at the end of the year and bring us the top 10 most underreported stories of the year. So it's a feature that goes out to all alt weeklies, have the option of running it, and we choose to most years. And this year it has a special focus. Usually it's a little bit more random or scattershot, and this year's kind of top 10 list all kind of fell into a theme, which is billionaires getting richer and owning more and more of the press.
Yeah, the billionaires get richer and they own more of the press. Isn't that the way of the world?
Increasingly so. So, for example, like one of the stories in the top 10 list is that the fossil fuel industry in the United States is subsidized to the tune of $11 million a minute. So as, there is increasing, very real increasing angst over climate change and its impacts, and very real efforts by local governments and advocacy groups and everybody else to move toward a zero emission world. The Congress keeps making it cheaper and cheaper for the fossil fuel industry to operate in the United States. Not coincidentally, perhaps, I think story number 3 or 4 on the list is that 128 members of Congress have documented investments in the fossil fuel industry. And untold others get donations from the fossil fuel industry.
Why am I not the least bit surprised?
Because you're a realist and a cynic, Matt. One of the many things I love about you.
I was going to say that is an uplifting story, but I think it's only uplifting a certain sector of the population.
The top 1%, it is apparently very uplifting.
Right. Well, people will need to judge for themselves, take a look at that. But I think in light of the recent last 24 hours, probably should move on to more current stuff, and that is what has been happening with the earthquake here in Humboldt County.
Absolutely. We, as the rest of the county, pivoted quickly at 2:34 on Tuesday morning, December 20th, when the earth shook violently. I've been in a lot of earthquakes and don't recall being in any quite like that, where it was quite as forceful and as long. It felt like it just went on forever. And I was up at my home in McKinleyville, so I can only imagine what it felt like closer to the epicenter near Ferndale. So the quake struck 2 miles offshore. I'm still a little sleep deprived and trying to catch up. 2 miles offshore, about 13 miles southwest of Ferndale. And really, the shaking apparently was felt as far south as the Bay Area, as far east as Reading, and everybody in Humboldt County that I've talked to felt it pretty forcefully. I think, as most folks will know, power was knocked out to most of the county. We haven't gotten a clear explanation from PG&E exactly why that was, but the result was 71,000 PG&E customers without power for most of the day. Yesterday on December 20th, and then by the end of the day, by early evening, most of the county had been restored, although the Eel River Valley, which was hardest hit, those communities were still without power, and most of them remain without power today. So it's Ferndale, Rio Dell, and a big part of Fortuna.
Yeah, and this was not without casualties either, this event.
Yeah, so at a press conference in Rio Dell yesterday, Sheriff William Hansel announced that in addition to the 12 injuries that were sustained as part of the 12 and counting injuries that were sustained as part of the quake, there were 2 deaths due to medical emergencies, either during or immediately after the quake, that were attributed to the inability to provide them with immediate medical attention due to the earthquake. So yeah, at least 2 deaths at this point, and then there's the dozen documented injuries as of yesterday afternoon. But there was also officials were saying that more and more injuries were being reported. None of them major, but the kind of minor injuries that most people said, I'm okay, it's not a big deal. But then as time went on, realized it was something they should probably get treatment for.
Right, and this event seemed to do the worst damage down in Rio Dell.
Yeah, surprisingly, Ferndale, which usually gets walloped pretty hard by these events, escaped pretty unscathed. I mean, I think there's a lot of property damage inside people's homes, but as far as real structural damage, there wasn't much. But that was not the case in Rio Dell, which was walloped pretty hard, both infrastructure-wise and as far as residences. I got off the phone with Kyle Knopp today, a little bit before we recorded this on the 21st, and he says the latest count is that 35 houses there have been red tagged now, meaning they are unsafe for human habitation, and that's with, I think, about 2/3 of the homes in the city now having been inspected. So that number is probably going to climb some. He said 9 families, stayed at an overnight shelter set up in Fortuna last night because they didn't have any place else to go. And he wasn't sure all of those were from Rio Dell, but I think most of them were. Additionally, the water system in Rio Dell was hit really hard. So residents there are currently without running water. That means no drinking water, but also no wastewater. So the city and the California Office of Emergency Services have brought in bottled water that's being distributed at the fire station there, and then set up portable toilets throughout town. Kyle Knopp, again, the city manager, was optimistic that by the end of the day they could have water restored to about half the city, with the other half coming tomorrow. But he cautioned, saying that, to some degree they won't know all the flaws in the system and all the damage to the system until they start turning the water back on. So it could be very much a 1 step forward, 2 steps back kind of situation, where once they get the water flowing, they realize there's some bigger issues. Yeah,
and there's also in other some major infrastructure concerns in other areas, and the one I most famously is the kind of elderly bridge out there that goes across the Eel River and down to Ferndale.
Yeah, the 100-year-old Queens Bridge, the longest operational concrete bridge in the world, I think it is. I can't remember exactly what the designation is, but it's on the Historic Register of Places, and was pretty badly beat up. Although it sounds like I got word today that it's expected to open to some extent to one-way controlled traffic today. And there is some optimism that damage is not as bad as initially thought. Either way, the state has pledged, I guess, already $6 million in repair funds for Fern Bridge, and a contracting crew was ready to start work yesterday. So that is getting immediate attention, and of course, it is the main artery to and from Ferndale, really connecting Ferndale to Highway 101 and the outside world. So there's a lot of importance on getting that back and fully operational.
So I know it's really very early, to ask this question, but maybe has anyone put a preliminary price tag on this seismic event?
I have not seen one. At this point, all the cities in Humboldt County have put out kind of damage reporting lines and are encouraging residents to call and report both, private property damage as far as, stuff that came off the shelves and items lost, but then also any damage to their structure. And then city crews and state crews are still in the process of assessing damage to public structures and infrastructure and stuff. So I think it'll be some time before we get that preliminary number.
And just sort of on a personal note, you folks at the Journal had the fun time putting the paper out. I guess it was spread across to various casinos and hospitals, cafeterias.
Which is kind of normal for our crew, spread across casinos and hospitals.
Matt has an interesting idea of fun, but it was a challenge. Unfortunately, we're getting a little bit good at this. We had the public safety power shutoffs, which provided some similar challenges. And we had to scramble to find, places that had electricity where we could power all our various devices, and also Wi-Fi connections where we could send files and whatnot. So our production team, under the guidance of production manager Holly Harvey, holed up in a hotel room at the Blue Lake Casino, which has, is on its own microgrid, so retained power throughout. And our editorial team split up throughout the county, with some at the cafeteria at St. Joseph Hospital, myself at the cafeteria at Mad River Hospital, and Eureka Natural Foods, which was also generator powered up in McKinleyville. Finding basically wherever we could find a wall socket and a connection to send files and get on the phone and talk to people about what was going on.
Yeah, so I'd like to apologize if you were at St. Joe's yesterday and you were looking for an outlet or a muffin. That was us. I'm sorry.
Well done. Well done. Any final thoughts? This is obviously a developing situation. We're going to be finding out a lot more over the course of the next week. In the next 24 hours, 48 hours, a lot could become more apparent. But any final thoughts about this event and things that people might want to know if they need help, or if there are places to look for help?
Yeah, I think if anybody who needs assistance of any kind should contact the Humboldt Office of Emergency Services, which is really the clearinghouse, and can connect folks with anything they need, whether it's shelter stuff through the Red Cross, or food assistance through Food for People, or anything like that, or help with reporting damage. I think my big takeaway is that is as bad as this is, and I really don't want to minimize the damage to Rio Dell and what residents there are facing or going through, but it's just a really big reminder for all of us in Humboldt County that we do live in earthquake country, and a massive earthquake, much larger than the one experienced on the 20th, is predicted anytime now. And so it was clear to us in doing some reporting and seeing lines at gas stations and lines at supermarkets with people stocking up on bottled water and stuff, that maybe we're not all as prepared as we should be for something like this. I know personally, I did not go to sleep on the 19th with at least a half a tank of gas in my car, which I wish I had, and that's something I'll endeavor to do from now on. But I think it's a good reminder to take stock of our earthquake plans, take stock of our earthquake supplies, and make sure we are better prepared when the next one comes.
That's good advice for everybody. Thanks, Thad. Now we're gonna turn over to Jen and see whether she had an adequate supply of quiche stocked away.
I wish. I did, however, do a bunch of Christmas cookie baking the night before, so I've got like 3-gallon bags of cookies waiting. So, we were at least ready in case it rained milk.
But you're all set.
I'm always ready. I stay ready. So a thing that's really nice, though, is this week's paper, speaking of cookies, if you are not done with your cookie baking, or if your cookie baking was delayed by, say, your oven going dark during a power outage, we have one more cookie to offer for your Christmas platter and or other holiday platters, and that is the Besitos de Nuez, and that is the Mexican wedding cookies, which are a nutty little delight. And they are from a cookbook called Chicano Bakes. The author, Esteban Castillo, you might recall, is the creator of the blog and accompanying book, Chicano Eats, in which he brings recipes from what he calls his Mexican American kitchen. And he's actually a wonderful photographer and a wonderful cook. And he really built a reputation for himself and a following on these bright, beautiful shots of Mexican pastries and foods, and like everything from tacos to parfaits, all kind of done in a slightly new way, either because they're presented in this new way or because he sort of blended them with the way that he enjoyed them growing up. They're not necessarily things that are 100% traditional Mexican cooking. They are a Mexican American, a Chicano take on these things. And they're pretty delightful, including all the things that are in the Chicano Bakes book, which is still colorful, still fun, still very much a blending of cultures, but also kind of disco. There's lots of shiny, like mylar and rainbow effects and prisms and just flash and glitter. And you have not, you think about Mexican wedding cookies and you probably had them on, a nice plate or a doily at someone's grandma's house. But these are like presented when you see the picture in the journal on a rainbow lit up platter. And it looks like Studio 54, both in terms of the lighting, the glamour, and the vast amount of powdered sugar. But one of the things that I love about this book is that it is joyful that way. And Esteban, I got to talk to him a little bit about putting together the book, spent the whole creation of this book listening to disco. It was 2020. He was in lockdown. He couldn't go on the usual kind of book tour he would go on with his first book ever. And, that's something you've been looking forward to doing your whole life. Now, it gets put on hold by the pandemic. We can all empathize. He had just gotten married. Everybody was baking because the pandemic was, locking them down in their homes. And so he was like, you know what? I'm going to start putting together a baking book. And he also came out to his dad, the last person that he came out to. And he describes himself as a queer Chicano man and a person who's influenced by both American and Mexican culture and Mexican culture in America. And, his family is, of course, a huge part of that. But he had not really had this hard conversation with his dad, with whom he had a complicated relationship. Pause to reflect on your own complicated relationship with your dad. And then he did, and things really got better. It was not, the thing that he had been anxious about. It actually made things better, and their relationship is better than it's ever been. And he said he just felt lighter and he felt joyful, and he wanted to bring that into the book. And disco brings you that joy. So the whole book is full of really great recipes. One thing that I know is haunting Thad's dreams is the horchata tiramisu. There are all kinds of hot punches, cold punches. There are some savory things. There are tamales that are stuffed with meat and tamales that are stuffed with pineapples or strawberries. There are all kinds of really wonderful things. Have you ever had choco flan? No, choco flan?
I've not tried
It's
it.
fantastic. It's one of those weird cakes where like one part rises through the other, and it's like, am I Julia Child or am I Bill Nye the Science Guy? This creates a layer of flan on top, and it's a bundt cake, a layer of flan on top, and then a layer of chocolate cake on the bottom, We no longer are cursed.
Talking my language, Jen.
Forced. Right? We no longer have to choose cake or pudding. But he has a choco flan in there, one that's red velvet. He has one that's a pumpkin choco flan. He has a more traditional choco flan. He's got all of these great interpretations of classic Mexican desserts with something new going on, like the wedding cakes, for example, have a little bit of hazelnut liqueur in them and brown butter. And that just kind of makes them a little fancier, a little bit more aromatic, and maybe like slightly more special, but still giving you that same hit of a classic that you crave. And I really urge you to try the cookie, try making it. If you are a fancy person with tons of money, you can substitute pistachios. Well.
So Jen, if somebody were looking for this cookbook, where would they find it?
So you can either go to his Chicano Eats blog, or you can find it pretty much at any, you can find it on online booksellers, but my advice would be to contact your local favorite bookseller here in Humboldt County and ask them to order it for you, which they usually can. And besides, Esteban Castillo is a Humboldt State University graduate back from before it was Cal Poly Humboldt. So don't write angry letters about how the name has changed. So he appreciates the local bookstores and things around here. So go ahead and order them through our independent booksellers and support our little community here, especially since they're probably cleaning up a lot of books today.
I'll bet. And the other thing they could do, of course, is they could stop by their local record shop and get a Donna Summer LP to go along with the cookbook.
Yes, I think that's an excellent idea. He specifically said that Sylvester's "You Make Me Feel Mighty Real" is a good selection for this one, but I think any of the disco that you know and love, maybe it's time to bring that back.
Yeah, I'm going to get out my Brick album.
Yeah, you can't see it, but Matt is actually wearing some like platform glitter, full glam, solid gold dancer shoes.
And you know what? I feel pretty.
You look amazing.
Sure. Well, Thad and Jen, thank you so much for this. I'm glad that you came through the ordeal that we all suffered through reasonably well. And that's about all the time we have for this show. North Coast Journal is on Newsstands now. You can find it online anytime, 24/7, 365 days a year. Thad and Jennifer and everyone who's listening out there, I hope we have a better holiday season, whatever your holiday is upcoming, and that we all make it through safe and sane into the new year.
Likewise, Matt. Stay safe out there.
Stay safe.